Saturday, 11th of May, 1985, Bradford, West Yorkshire. Thousands of people flee in panic as a thick pall of smoke and a wall of flames engulf the main spectator stand of Bradford City Football Club Stadium. The fans of both sides on the opposite side of the ground, helping the ones to try and escape the fire behind them, pulling them over the barriers and assisting them all to safety. But sadly, not everyone was lucky enough to make it. So what had caused such a catastrophic fire to have spread so exponentially in such a short space of time? Join us as Descent into Darkness looks at one of the darkest days in football history, the Valley Parade fire. Background. The Valley Parade Football Stadium has played host to sport since it was completed all the way back in 1886 and sits just north of the city centre in the area known as Manningham. Originally, the ground was built for a rugby team called Manningham Rugby Football Club, formed in 1876, which they used as their home stadium until 1906, whereupon they decided to shift tack entirely from rugby to football, or soccer for my much valued US viewers, and adopted the new name of Bradford City AFC, standing for Association Football Club. Only 2 years later, the fledgling club gained promotion to the First Division, what we would now call the Premier League, and with the extra prestige and money that such a position commanded, the club decided to have Valley Parade redeveloped to include better facilities and greater capacity, which was raised to an astonishing 40,000, accounting for a great number of people standing in the days before the rule changes brought about by the infamous Hillsborough disaster of April 1989, a certain topic for another video in the future. Only 3 years later, in 1911, Valley Parade would achieve its record attendance figure, which still stands to this day, of 39,146 for a match against Burnley on the 11th of March for an FA Cup tie. Whilst far from being the highest, this is the oldest attendance record in the whole Football League. Nowadays, Valley Parade has a much reduced capacity of 24,136, a lot of which stemming from a lesser league status, the aforementioned ban on standing after Hillsborough, and the redevelopment of the main stand after the event that we will be covering today. The ground also now goes under the official name of the University of Bradford Stadium, following a sponsorship deal. The fateful day. On Saturday the 11th of May 1985, Bradford City were due to host Lincoln City in their final game of the 84-85 season of the Third Division. Bradford was flying high after their 2-0 win the previous week, which had secured them the league title and promotion to the Second Division. 11,076 people had made the trip to Valley Parade, which included an official ceremony before the game where the champions would be presented with the league trophy. Spirits were very much through the roof around the ground with this final game to cap off a fantastic season for the West Yorkshiremen. The kick-off whistle was blown, and the two sets of fans settled in for a good game. But just before the 40th minute of the match, with the score still at 0-0, the first signs of trouble were noticed. From what we are now able to piece together, a man named Eric Bennett, whom was in the main stand, looked down at his feet and saw a small wisp of smoke and the vague glimpse of a bright orange flame between the wooden boards of the stand beneath him. Only a minute or so previously, Bennett had just finished smoking a cigarette and had tossed the butt away. Now that he saw the small bit of smoke and flame, he decided to pour out the coffee that he was drinking into the gap to try and extinguish the fire, but this proved a futile effort. Only a short while later, when others began to notice small flames toward the uppermost part of the stand, 3 rows from the back wall, police officers who were directing fans away from this small fire had asked over their radios for some fire extinguishing equipment, but, in a tragic twist, all fire extinguishers in the main stand had previously been removed due to vandalism. This small fire quickly grew into a full-on blaze very quickly, and within 6 minutes, the game had been halted by the referee to allow the stadium staff to evacuate the supporters in the main stand. However, the flames and smoke were now unstoppable, and the wholly wooden structure of the stand only added more fuel to the inferno, which now engulfed the roof of the stand, which very soon began to weaken and collapse. The top of the roof was covered in roofing felt impregnated with bitumen, or tar, which of course is itself highly flammable under the right conditions, making everything even worse. Widespread panic ensued amongst the supporters in the stand, who tried desperately to scramble away from the immense heat, flames, and the thick, choking black smoke that billowed up into the air. This was made worse by a strong wind that was blowing on that day and served to fan the flames and spread it further and quicker. As the situation rapidly deteriorated, more and more people became crushed by the sheer weight of bodies trying to flee, with many taking the option of escaping over the crowd barriers that surrounded the pitch and onto the field. For a lot, this was the only option, as narrow corridors inside the stand were blocked by locked doors and turnstiles. Due to the nature of the main stand having been built on a hillside, the only entrances and exits to the stand were at the rear, which of course was where the fire was. Burning roof timbers had begun to fall onto the milling mass of panicked fans, as those at the back of the stand tried to force their way forwards. The numbers of people all trying to get over the 2 5-foot-high walls onto the pitch at once made no easy task, as people were pinned against the barriers by those behind them, with the fire licking at their backs. Screams and shouts and coughing from the smoke filling the stadium as fans finally managed to get away from the stand, sprinting as best they could across the pitch to the other stands, where they could reach safety and get out of the ground. Fans in the other stands around the pitch did what they could to help pull people over the barriers to safety. But whilst all this was going on, in an absolutely crazy reaction, a large number of fans who were still in a euphoric mood following their league victory were dancing and cheering in front of the cameras, whilst an entire section of their stadium is literally burning to the ground and others screaming and desperately trying to get away. Not exactly a glowing endorsement of English football fans, but there you go. Bradford's chairman, Stafford Higginbottom, recalled of the moment, quote, "The fire just spread along the length of the stand in seconds. The smoke was choking. We couldn't breathe." According to former club official Steve Smith, quote, "All of a sudden a sheet of flame went up to the roof and along the entire length of the stand. Within 5 minutes of it starting, the whole stand was burnt down. In fact, I think it was timed at 4 minutes 35 seconds. The strong wind was fanning it from the end where the blaze had started. In total, the entire main stand was completely destroyed by the fire in only 9 minutes. An absolutely shocking fact that really puts things into perspective. I would not even like to imagine the sheer terror of that moment for those involved trying to escape from it. In truth, it is astounding that more were not killed, given the speed at which the blaze spread." Aftermath and conclusions. As the remnants of the main stand finally collapsed into a heap of blazing wood, thousands of people were streaming from the ground to awaiting ambulances, while police and medical personnel poured into the ground to help those still inside. Many from the main stand who were suffering from the effects of smoke inhalation and burns of varying severity were taken away as quickly as possible to the nearby Bradford Hospital. The news of the tragedy has spread around the local community after residents had looked out of their windows and seen the huge cloud of smoke coming from the stadium, which led to many deciding to go out to try and help where they could. The final death toll of the tragedy was 56 dead and a further 265 people injured. At least 5 of those killed had only been 11 years old. The oldest fatality was that of the 86-year-old former club chairman, Sam Firth. Several police officers and around 22 fans were awarded commendations for their bravery in helping others to escape the fire. When the findings of the public inquiry into the fire that was led by Sir Oliver Popplewell was published, the cause of the fire was later determined by forensic scientist David Woolley to have been caused by a still-lit cigarette butt or a match that had fallen between the floorboards of the stand and had landed amongst a large pile of rubbish and debris that had been accumulating beneath the stand for several months, if not years. Most of this material being flammable. This was the same small flame that Eric Bennett had seen and had dumped his coffee over before the true seriousness of the situation had become apparent. The West Yorkshire Fire Brigade had warned the club about the build-up of debris underneath the stand before the disaster, but seemingly nothing had been done about it. The inquiry found Bradford City Football Club and West Yorkshire Fire Brigade as being jointly responsible for the disaster occurring, which saw fines totalling around 20 million, being the largest ever civil action brought before a British court to that date. However, crucially, no criminal charges were ever filed in relation to the fire. Following the disaster, rules were quickly brought in that mandated all football grounds in the top divisions of the Football League replacing their wooden stands with concrete and steel, with the construction of new wooden stands being outright banned. Smoking was further banned, and strict cleaning regimens of all areas of the stadium were implemented. An appeal fund was launched in the wake of the tragedy to raise money for those affected, which raised about £3.5 million, the equivalent of about 13.4 million today. The awful irony of the disaster was that the wooden roof of the main stand was due to be replaced by a steel one the very day after the Lincoln game, as this would have been the end of the season and offered ample time for the work to be carried out before the start of the new season. This was actually a prerequisite of the club entering the next division up and had more stringent safety rules. One small comfort can be taken in knowing that, at least unlike many grounds elsewhere at the time, there wasn't any metal fencing between the spectator areas and the pitch. Had this been the case, the number of dead and injured would almost certainly have been significantly higher, although this comes as little comfort to the families of those who did perish. Work to rebuild the main stand and to modify the other existing stands was not begun until July of the following year. In the meantime, Bradford City's reserve team continued to play their fixtures at Valley Parade, but no spectators were allowed to attend. The first team were generously hosted by other grounds around West Yorkshire for their home games for around 19 months before the rebuilding work was completed and the home team could return to their ground once more in December of 1986. Legacy. The Valley Parade fire casts a long shadow onto English football history and has gone down as one of the deadliest football-related disasters in history, ranking as the 10th worst in the world. A memorial to the disaster was erected at Valley Parade, and another one was presented to Bradford City Hall by representatives of Bradford's twin city of Hamm in Germany, a very kind gesture. Veteran TV weatherman for the regional news programme Look North, Paul Hudson, was in attendance that day as a young lad who had gone to the game with his uncle and a friend named Richard. The group were in the main stand when it went up and had to fight for their very lives to escape. In an interview on the 30th anniversary of the blaze in 2015, Mr. Hudson spoke of his memories.
Why do you think it should be remembered? It just has to be, doesn't it? Because of all those poor people. And I still can't believe it's 30 years ago. I can still smell the smoke. It was just awful. On that afternoon, just before half-time, I was stood with my uncle and we just noticed, just down here, wisps of smoke coming up from the stand, but there was no sense of panic. Nobody really knew what was going on. In fact, people made a joke of it at the time. Already there was thick, black, acrid smoke beginning to gather at the top, and you began to see the flames coming up. There were quite a few people beginning to climb over what was a wooden barrier into the back of the stand, because I think people's natural reaction was to get out towards the back of the stand. It was only a very, very narrow space, and on the left-hand side I approached a kiosk where you could get tea and coffee and things like that, and I remember the details like it was yesterday. There was an old gentleman stood there and he'd just bought a cup of tea and he refused to move until he got his change. And I just remember that thick black smoke. It was black as night. The wall of smoke just crept down, and then eventually it was just like the middle of night. You couldn't see anything at all. And then I can only describe it as everybody's animal instinct kicked in. I think perhaps that's what happens, but so it's just
30 years ago, it's still difficult.
yeah.
Have you thought about it much since then?
Well, you do on occasions. The detail is just very graphic. That final moment, you're trying to get over this barrier, and everybody's kicking and screaming and pulling at each other and pushing and shoving, and I still to this day don't know how I got over.
I cannot help but feel a slight pang of sympathy for Eric Bennett, if indeed it was he who had inadvertently begun the fire. To have such a thing hanging over one's conscience for all these years must weigh very heavily on one's mind. I shall leave you with the names of the 56 lives cut so tragically short on that day, people who just wanted to go and watch their favourite team play, only to never come home. May they all rest in peace. John Douglas Ackroyd, age 32. Edmund Anderton, 68. Alexander Shaw Baines, 70. Herbert Bamford, 72. Christopher James Bulmer, 11. Jack Leo Coxon, 76. Leo Anthony Coxon, 44. David James Crabtree, 30. Harry Crabtree, 76. Derek Dempsey, 46. Muriel Firth, 56. Samuel Firth, 86. Andrew Fletcher, 11. Edmund Fletcher, 63. John Fletcher, 34. Peter Fletcher, 32. Nellie Forster, 64. Felix Winspear Greenwood, 13. Peter Greenwood, 46. Rupert Benedict Greenwood, 11. Norman Hall, 71. Peter Anthony Halliday, 34. Arthur Hartley, 79. Edith Hindle, 79. Frederick Hindle, 76. Moira Helen Hodgson, 15. Eric Hudson, 72. John Hughes, 64. John Hutton, 74. Walter Kerr, 76. Peter Charles Lovell, 43. Jack Ludlam, 55. Gordon Stewart McPherson, 39. Irene McPherson, 28. Roy Mason, 74. Frederick Norman Middleton, 84. Harold Mitchell, 79. Elizabeth Mull, 21. Ernest Normington, 74. Gerald Priestley Ormondroyd, 40. Richard John Ormondroyd, 12. Robert Ian Ormondroyd, 12. Sylvia Lund Pollard, 69. Herbert Price, 78. Amanda Jane Roberts, 20. Jane Sampson, 18. William Stacey, 72. Craig Albert Stockman, 14. Jane Ashley Stockman, 16. Trevor John Stockman, 38. Howard Malcolm Turner, 41. Sarah Elizabeth Turner, 16. Simon Neil Ward, 18. Robert Wedgeworth, 72. William James West, 78. And Adrian Mark Wright, aged 11. Thank you for watching this video. I do hope you found it informative and interesting. I'd also love to know what you thought of it, so please head on down to the comments section and let me know. If you are really into the dark side of history, check out my back catalogue to find even more great deep dive videos like this one covering all the topics your heart could desire. And of course, consider subscribing to DID and click the bell icon to be notified when I put out a new video. Don't forget to enable notifications as well. If you wish to do so, you can support DID on Patreon or become a channel member directly through YouTube to help support the work I do, bringing these historical accounts to life for you. A huge thank you to my current and past donors and supporters. Every single one of you is instrumental in pushing me to get better and carrying on these fascinating projects. And don't forget my merch store to pick yourself up some branded swag if you would like a tangible item in exchange for your support. Furthermore, if you would like something a little more light-hearted to listen to, head on over to my alternate channel DID Reads, where I post far less gruesome content, such as poetry, famous speech, short stories, and even children's stories in my sweet, silky voice for maximum ASMR points. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I shall see you on our next descent into darkness.